The little girl sat cross-legged on the cold wooden floor of her tiny room, clutching the sheet of paper she had folded and unfolded a dozen times. The words on it blurred and sharp, at once begging for something she had never dared ask for aloud. She whispered the lines under her breath, hoping. The walls would not laugh at her hope outside the window. The streetlights flickered, and shadows danced across the peeling, wallpaper making shapes that seemed alive, and she imagined them nodding. In secret understanding, she stared at the envelope in her small hands and felt the weight of her wish pressing down like an invisible hand that would not let go. Her fingers trembled as she wrote the address one last time and then erased it, fearing. She had done something wrong, yet a small spark of courage grew in her chest, telling her it was now or never. She slid the envelope beneath the mailbox and watched as the paper disappeared into the darkness as if swallowed by the night itself. But the night seemed to pause, holding its breath in silence miles away. The widowed CEO sat in his high-rise office, staring at the city below, skyscrapers glittering like broken promises. The room was cold and empty, the walls lined with accolades that meant nothing. The clock ticked and ticked, but it was not the sound of time he noticed, it was the emptiness. The hollow echo of laughter that had left him years ago when life had decided to take more than it had given, and the phone rang, startling him as if it had been waiting just for this moment. The voice on the other end was soft, hesitant, almost fearful, and it read the words of a small child. A letter asking for a family, someone to love, and someone to hold her when the night became too heavy. The CEO froze, feeling something stir in a place he had forgotten existed in his chest, a tenderness that he thought had been buried beneath spreadsheets, meetings, and endless flights, and he whispered a name he had not spoken in years, a name that belonged to someone he had thought he had lost forever. Without thinking, he found himself standing outside a small house tucked away in a quiet street, the headlights of his car cutting through the darkness like searchlights in a silent battlefield. He felt the absurdity of it, a grown man following a letter from a stranger, but there was no stopping the pull. The letter had planted a seed that grew faster than reason could contain, and he stepped out of the car feeling the cold air bite at his skin and the anticipation curl in his stomach. The little girl heard the sound of the car pulling up and ran to the window, heart hammering in her chest. She pressed her face against the glass, trying to see through the darkness, and for a moment she thought it was a dream, a shadow of her wish taking shape before her eyes. And when the doorbell rang, her hand froze halfway to the handle. The sound lingered longer than it should, as if the night itself had stretched time to make her wait for the impossible. Inside the car he sat, gripping the steering wheel, unsure if he had the courage to knock. The letter's words echoing in his mind, asking for someone to come and someone to stay. He thought of the years he had spent building walls around his heart, walls that had kept grief in and warmth out. But now those walls seemed fragile and tiny compared to the small hand that she had reached out across the miles and written words he could not ignore. He lifted his hand, trembling, slightly unsure if he was ready to step across the threshold into a life that could change everything. He walked to the door and paused, his hand hovering over the wood, as if sensing that beyond this thin barrier lay a world that had been waiting for him, just as he had been waiting for it for so long. The little girl shifted behind the curtain, peeking out and holding her breath, wishing the moment would stretch forever. But the air felt heavy with secrets and promises that had yet to be spoken, and as he finally knocked, the sound echoed in the hallway, a single beat, and then silence that seemed too loud for the quiet house. The girl clutched her blanket to her chest, her mind racing with fear and hope intertwined. She wanted to run and hide, but something told her this was the answer to her wish. The knock sounded again, firmer this time, more certain, and she felt a shiver run down her spine, as if the world itself was holding its breath for what would happen next. Outside the window, shadows shifted, strangely forming shapes she could not name, and she shivered not from cold, but from the feeling that everything was about to change. Forever. The CEO waited, a heartbeat Then another feeling. The air thick with expectation. He wondered if he should knock again or turn away, but a voice in the back of his mind whispered this was the moment, the one that could undo years of solitude and grief. And as the door creaked slightly ajar, he glimpsed the face of a small girl peering through the gap. And he realized in that instant that nothing would ever be the same again, and that the letter had not only found him, it had summoned him into a story. He did not yet understand. The little girl stepped back just enough to let him enter, and the house seemed to exhale as if it had been waiting decades for someone to cross the threshold. Her small fingers still clutched the blanket, and she felt the strange warmth in her chest that came from hope and fear tangled together behind her eyes, and she whispered a greeting barely louder than a breath. He nodded, slowly unsure of what words could do justice to the moment, and yet the silence between them spoke louder than any sentence could. He looked around the room, the walls lined with faded photographs and tiny drawings taped crookedly to the surfaces of life, half-lived, pressed into every corner, and he felt the weight of it pressing into him, a reminder of what he had lost and what might still be saved. The girl watched him cautiously, her eyes wide and bright, searching for any sign of doubt or retreat, and when she saw none, she took a tiny step forward, offering him a hand that trembled as much as her heart. He knelt, slowly taking her hand gently. It felt small and fragile in his grasp, and a wave of memories he had buried for years surged through him, stories of lullabies never sung and dinners never shared. The warmth of a presence long gone, and yet here it was, in a small hand reaching across the divide between grief and stave and hope, and he wondered if perhaps the universe had been waiting for this moment as much as he had without knowing it. House seemed to listen, the floorboards creaking underfoot as if whispering secrets of all the footsteps that had passed before, and the shadows in the corners twisted like smoke shapes that made him glance toward the windows more than once, and the girl sensed his unease and whispered, "It's only the night. It's only shadows," and yet a sudden noise from upstairs made them both freeze, the sound of a floorboard bending and a soft thump that had no clear origin. He placed a finger to his lips, urging silence, and together they moved toward the sound, the air thick and heavy with anticipation, each step magnifying the unknown. The little girl clutched his sleeve tightly, feeling both fear and an odd kind of courage she had never known, and when they reached the top of the narrow stairs, the noise stopped, leaving a silence that screamed louder than any sound, and he hesitated, wondering if it was a trick of the mind or something else entirely. Window upstairs rattled gently, as if caught in a whispering wind, but the night was still, and the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for them to decide. The little girl tugged at his sleeve, her eyes shining. She wanted answers. She wanted reassurance that he would not leave, that the promise made by a piece of paper could be kept. And he nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment, knowing that a single step could change everything for both of them. And yet the uncertainty lingered like a shadow, refusing to fade. They entered the room cautiously, the moonlight spilling through the curtains, revealing furniture covered in dust, sheets like ghosts of a life paused in time, and in the corner, a small trunk shifted slightly, as if moved by an unseen hand, and he froze, realizing that this house held more than memories. It held secrets that were waiting to reveal themselves, and the girl stepped forward, drawn by curiosity and fear both, and her fingers brushed the corner of the trunk, causing it to tilt and creak in a way that made both hearts jump suddenly. A whisper echoed through the room, faint and almost melodic, calling a name neither of them expected. The sound floated and vanished, leaving a chill in the air, and he took a step back, unsure if he should follow or flee. The little girl felt a thrill she could not name, as if the night itself was speaking to them, promising something beyond their imagination, but also warning of consequences they could not yet see. And when the trunk lid slowly began to rise by itself, a cold wind swept through the room, and the candle flickered, casting shadows that moved like living things. The girl and the CEO exchanged A glance the fear and wonder mirrored in their eyes, the trunk revealed a letter. Carefully sealed and ancient-looking, and he bent down to pick it up, the weight of it heavier than paper should be. And the girl whispered, "Whose is it? Whose letter is?" That, and before he could answer, a sudden sound from the street below made them both jump. A shadow passed across the window faster than any human could move, and the air outside felt charged with anticipation and danger that neither of them could yet comprehend. He opened the letter, hands trembling, and the script inside seemed familiar and strange, at once a story written long ago, speaking directly to them, asking for choices that had consequences far beyond the night. The girl leaned close, trying to read over his shoulder, and the words shimmered in the dim light, like they were alive, promising family and warmth, but also hinting at secrets buried in the house that had waited decades.